Welcome back to Virteva's Let's Talk podcast. It's April 2025 and it's episode 29. And on this week's show, we're going to be taking a break from Copilot for a change to talk about everything new that's come to Microsoft Teams since we last visited that topic back in July. All right, Holly, welcome back to the show. I don't know who's more excited today because we love doing Microsoft Teams centric episodes.
Yep.
And I feel like for a long time, you couldn't escape doing the team stuff because that's where Microsoft's focus was. And I feel like since probably mid last year, even beginning of last year, 2024, is you just couldn't turn a corner without running into Copilot somewhere.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to come back today and spend a little bit more time talking about everything that's changed in Teams. I think on that last show that we did, we talked about how they've been making improvements to the avatar and the Teams mesh stuff. I just saw a recent announcement that Teams town halls can now support up to 100,000 people, which it was previously, I think, like 10 or 20,000, which is insane because it can basically support like an entire like small city or village.
Exactly.
Across Microsoft CDN. I don't think that I'm ever going to be on a town hall that big, but that's pretty cool.
We have some customers that use them, and I know that they will greatly appreciate that increase. We have a group that is basically like a healthcare system, and they have town halls and kind of those live event type things with their members. So I think that they could really push closer to that limit, and they really have been wanting it. So very excited for them.
Well, exciting news for them then that they can finally get close to 100,000 people on a call. I think where we're probably going to spend a lot of the time today during the show is showing off kind of the new chat and channel features that are just started rolling out to global availability. I've had access to them since December or January when they rolled out to targeted. And they're really fun. I've got my own thoughts and feelings on it as well, and we'll talk about that when we get to the section. But I think that for most Teams users today, it's going to make using Teams a heck of a lot easier. So,
yeah.
Holly, you volunteered to do the demos today. I think I've done the last two on the last couple of podcasts. So for our audio-only listeners, we will do our best to describe what we're talking about. But if you really want to get the full piece out of it, join us over on the YouTube page or check us out on some of the YouTube clips that'll come out later in April. And we'll be sure to show you a little bit more of this visually so you can get a better feel for what's new in Teams. So, Holly, give me 1 sec and I'll let you take over. All right, Holly, you've got the board. Let's go.
Well, a lot of people, I know that this is rolling out to GA because I'm starting to see it in some of my customer-facing accounts that I use to work with them. So for the time being, I would say for anyone listening, expect that your teams are going to be logging into Teams or firing up Teams one day, and they're going to get a pop-up encouraging them to try out the new chat and channels experience. This is something you can defer a couple of times, but at some point, you just get it. So you can say, not right now, no thanks, but at some point, it's not going to give you any choice. So let's first start out with we're in Teams. I do have the new chat and channels experience showing, but let's start off right off the bat talking about how to learn what's new in Teams. So if you click on the three dots next to your user icon, you can go down to the help area and see what's new. This will just open it'll either open natively if you're using Teams desktop just in the Teams window, but here I have it opening in the web on a new tab. But here are some great ways to learn about new features. Some are going to be really apparent, like the new chat and channels feature, and others are going to be lurking somewhere below the surface. You might not encounter them right away. Here we have things like being able to edit your name or your display name in a meeting. So we have a coworker whose display name when he joins meetings is Anthony, but we all know he goes by Tony, so Tony might be able to edit that. Or if your display name is just you prefer to be a first name, not a first and last name, you'll be able to edit that. Here, we'll just kind of scroll down and you can see.
I was going to say it's worth noting on that too. Sorry to interrupt, but this is a setting that I think is going to be a little controversial across different organizations, depending on how it gets used. Your name will change for Teams in that meeting only, and it will tell people still who you actually are. It's just going to kind of show you kind of like a nickname. there's probably going to be people at different organizations that have a Bodie McBoat face showing up in the meeting when they change their names. So just keep that in mind. At the tenant level, you can also
Use
disable
it for
this setting.
good and not
So
evil.
if it starts to get a little out of control, you can stop it.
Yep. Yeah. So here are some things just to highlight. Meetings transcription enhancements, with the availability of, better translation, better transcription. These are improvements that are just naturally happening in the Teams environment. So the good news is if you've been let down by transcripts in the past, just know they're making improvements to that. So it's not necessarily a button you click. It's just an enhancement to the overall team service. So if we scroll down, I'm sure that this is going to be somewhere on here. I don't know when they announced it.
What are you looking
Here
for?
we
Test
go,
my
all
memory
the
of
way
dates
back in
and
November,
times.
because this was out in targeted release. So that means if you are you have a special channel that you live in, a lot of IT departments have people in targeted release. It just means that you'll get updates a little bit sooner than the rest of your organization. Some companies, we just have everyone in the targeted release channel, and some are just in the kind of more general availability. It just gives Microsoft a little bit of runway to work anything out as it goes out into GA. But the new chat and channels experience should be rolling out into GA right now. And essentially what it is it's having all of your teams, your chats in one single pane. So it basically takes your little icon for chat and your little icon for teams and merges them together. So you have everything in one spot. And Scott, as Scott mentioned, he's kind of got his own thoughts on it. I have my thoughts on it. And some of it, I think we both can agree that it probably has at least half to do with channel use and adoption.
Yep.
To have to go to two separate places to do this work is sometimes that's the difference. That's the barrier between using Teams or not. People love chats. Chat and group chat in Teams is super capable. This is sort of like slipstreaming channels into that experience that people really do like, that they adopt, and now kind of pushing that a little bit closer. So it's fewer places to go. I recommend trying it. Some people like to go back to the separate, keeping them separate, and some people like them merged. And the good news, you can choose. So let's actually go back over to the this sort of chat window. We can see now my chat is just chat. There's no Teams icon. But if I scroll through here, I've got my favorites, I've got chats, I've got teams and channels. So it's all here together. And I can filter this. If I want to just see my channels, I can just filter and go to channels. I can see just my unread messages. But I basically, I'm just using a single pane here. If you want to change this, so let's say you defer those notifications, you accept that there's a new experience, but you want to go back. If you click on the three dots here, you can customize your view. And what that does is it brings you to the chat and channel settings area. So those are just team settings, and you can choose to have them combined or go back to separate. And this is something that I don't know if Microsoft will really change. They're just giving you the option now. But I would encourage this for any groups that really want to make teams happen in their environment. Chat does really well. We want to bring that together. And I think the reason that chat works so well is, Scott, I can chat with you. I can chat with a group of people. And if we want to chat about a project that we're working on, we can just go seamlessly into a channel and make posts. So this is something that I highly recommend. And then here, you can, in your chat and channels list, you can modify this. So I've turned off Discover in my feed. I don't use it very much, but this is something you can choose to have on or off. Suggestions for hiding inactive channels. That's the one other thing that I think people don't love about channels is there's a lot of things you do use and a lot of stuff that you don't use within a team. So any channel that's doesn't have a lot going on in it, you don't have to look at it. It doesn't get deleted. It's just hidden. And
Just to
you can go
highlight on that
through and
discover field too, because that discover piece is brand new as well. It rolled out, I think, over the
yep,
summer. Is what that is it gets turned on by default. And what it's supposed to do
yep,
is, so Holly, if you turn it on and go back to that channel, that chat area, is it shows up at the top. And by clicking on that, what it's doing is it's trying to surface what Teams believes are the most important messages for you through your different chats and channels. So rather than you having to go down and find the unread message, or maybe all your messages are read, it will try and go out of its way to find the most important
yep,
messages to put them in front of you. If you have a copilot license as well, there'll also be an extra slider in there that'll allow you to put
yes.
copilot there if maybe you don't want it in kind of like that left that.
You don't want to have to go all the way over here
Yep.
to use it. So that's something that like I said, here we've got all of these things together in one place. Now, just like a game show, wait, there's more. I work with people all the time in the training and enablement space. And, what a team is, what a channel is, how to navigate it, it can be a real head scratcher for people even today, even though Teams has been around for many years at this point. It still represents a new way of working for people. So if we say working in a channel can be really similar to using a chat. And we often, the sort of benefit of a team, right? The true benefit, I think, is our conversations, our files, our work. It's in one spot that we can search, but it's all together. And we don't have emails, chats, information hiding all over the place. So this way we can have these distinct conversations. But when you look at this, you see this new thing called a section. So we have favorites, we have chats, we have teams and channels. If I had a section that I want to highlight as my Mark 8 project, and that includes some private chats that I have with people, as well as a couple of my channels, I can do that here. So I'm going to click on the drop down next to the new chat, and I'm going to make a new section. I'm going to call it Mark 8. I'll create it. And now all I have to do is add, I think if I can add, do I have to go individually? Sorry if I'm.
You have to go to, so if you want to add a person, you
Yeah, okay.
basically right click them with the dot,
Yep.
and add them to the group. And you can also do it with Teams channels as well. So if you're an organization that's using Teams channels for a lot and you need to keep track of those, the old way was you could pin to the chat area, you could pin to the Teams area for channels, but you couldn't put them together. Now this new experience brings that together. So you can have chats and channels pinned to the same favorite.
Yep. So here I've got my general channel for Mark 8 and this chat with Christy Klein just right there together. I don't have to, move them around, change them. I don't have to jump from chat to Teams to, I can just kind of create these sections. One of the things that I think also can be kind of a barrier, people love to organize. Since the dawn of Teams, people have wanted to be able to organize their chat view, organize their Teams list. And for the longest time, really all we had was pinning. You can pin chats, you can leave chats. You don't have a lot of ways of creating these distinct groups. If you turn on this experience, I have a feeling my subfolder, Kings and Queens, you know who you are. You want to organize things, this is for you. So I love this. So being able to group like with like is, very satisfying.
And the filters piece of it at the top is also really powerful. Like the previous version of this is you kind of had like your activity feed and you could change between two different settings. Like now you can just look at chats, you can just look at channels, you can look at unread across multiple items. If you have a Copilot or a Teams premium license, you can also look directly in on like your meeting transcriptions and recaps that were captured in there, which makes it a lot easier to get back to. One of the other new things that I've been seeing too is like, so I've had a Teams premium license for, I think, about 2 years at this point. And whenever I needed to get back to a recap, I had to go through my calendar and I had to find exactly where that meeting happened and on what day to go in and be able to find the recap and the stream recording. Now, what's been happening over the last few months is in your activity feed, when the meeting ends and the recap of the transcription finishes, is it will actually automatically just pop right in and say, hey, here's your meeting recap. By the way, you were mentioned in this meeting, and it kind of lets you dip in. Again, you are being paywalled into that through a Teams Premium or a
Yes.
Copilot license. But for those of us that have it, it's a really worthwhile addition from a value perspective. And again, we can go back and forth on like the Copilot pricing and value compared to Teams Premium. But if you're someone that is sitting in a lot of meetings and you're spending a lot of your time taking notes and then you're not paying attention in a meeting, that $10 per user per month Teams Premium license is well worth it for people that are sitting in meetings all day long. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have it, because it really fills so many gaps that lets me be more engaged during the meeting instead of having to sit there and take notes the entire time.
Yeah, I found that it's, again, with the transcription improvements, it is a lifesaver. You're a consultant, I'm a consultant. I need to take a lot of notes. I have to have really good recall. And it's so nice to be a little bit more present in those meetings for sure. So I also have Teams Premium just for that reason. I think it's awesome. It's just an awesome tool. So yeah, if you're the person who ends up taking a lot of notes in meetings, Teams takes notes for you. It's a time saver. It's awesome. So a couple other things that I think I would like to highlight, not only in the, sort of chat and channels experience, this is huge. A couple other things. Many of you may have noticed that you can now rename your first channel. So renaming the general channel.
The general channel, yep.
Can be very controversial. People, since I started leading Teams training, are like, can I delete that? Can I rename it? And I have had to say for years and years, no, it's a load-bearing channel. It's got to be there. But now we can actually go in and we can manage this channel. Now, I don't think I own this team, but here we can actually edit the name.
Yep.
And this is the one thing. General cannot be used. So if you create a new team, it's going to say, what do you want to name your first channel? So your first channel still behaves like the general channel, but you can call it whatever you want. And I think this is really helpful on a couple of things. Some people just never understood what general meant. I used to say, think of it like general team business. It's for everybody. And even that fell flat. And think about all the teams that we have out there that never need a second channel. They just do everything in general. So let's give them the opportunity to call that what we want it. So it's the end of an era, Godspeed, general.
Holly, from the technical side of the house, if you were to look at this so rename the channel to primary or whatever you want to call it, go to the SharePoint side of the house.
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious if that channel name actually changes or if this is just acting as an alias or a nickname.
That's definitely a good point. And the reason is and this is something that you may have noticed just on everything. Changes in a team reflecting back to what's actually going on in SharePoint can be, sometimes it doesn't, but let's try
I'm going to take the broad base assumption that it acts as an alias and that general channel is still called general on the back end, because you can create a team and you can change the name of the team after the fact. But if you go back and you kind of look at the URL in SharePoint for what that channel name is called, it'll generally still be called the old team name. It has a new display. Let's
rename this one that I own. I don't own this team, so could be. Hopefully the demo will go through. Okay, so we've got our primary channel. If you still like your first channel to be your first channel, just remember, channels just by nature of what they are are ordered alphabetically. So
Okay.
don't be surprised if you're, previously general kind of stuck to the top no matter what. It was general and then everything beneath it was alphabetical. Now everything is alphabetical. So I called this primary and here it is down here. But yeah, let's
I
go
wouldn't be
in.
surprised to see that change on the roadmap at some point either, so you can drag them
I
around a little
would,
bit.
I mean, some people, let me tell you, Microsoft, for every Teams thing I lead, I get asked, can I alphabetize my teams? And I say no, and it's sad. Okay, so here we're going to just pop into SharePoint, going from the Files tab, and we'll see what the URL. We're going to look at the URL, and we're going to look at the kind of back end what it is. So I'm just going to open this in SharePoint. So I did that from the Files tab. For anyone who's curious, how did I get here? All right.
All right, what do we got?
Okay. So that one was used to be called all. Okay. Hey, it changed to
So it
primary.
did change it
So
to
it
primary.
doesn't say general or all team. And I can't quite see
Yeah,
if
it's a little
it's
small
got.
for me on my screen, so I can't see that full address bar
It
link,
does.
but I'm
The
wondering if
URL
that's
says
where it changed.
primary.
Nice, nice. Congratulations,
So that's
Microsoft.
good.
You did something unexpected.
Well, we know traditionally, or we know since the inception of Teams, that wasn't always the case. You'd rename a channel, but the folder at the site level or at the SharePoint site level didn't change names. So if you look at your document library, you'd still see the old folder name. The channel in the team was named correctly, but the folder wasn't. Or in the kind of subfolder
The
of
giant
the
Access
document library.
database that's running all Microsoft 365 behind the scenes. Somehow they did it.
So again, this change, I would say, like anything, okay, we've all been bombarded with new Outlook. We get a little fatigued, but trust me when I say, if you or anyone else in your company is struggling to use and adopt the use of a team, the use of a channel, I usually say, like, first we saw all of the mail migrations, right? We don't see as many anymore, but all the accounts were created in Microsoft 365. Then came OneDrive, all the migrations to OneDrive, right? Scott and I have worked on 1,000 probably. Migrate to OneDrive, migrate to OneDrive. What's left? The shared drives, okay? People want to shut down that space in their data centers, so we're seeing those shared drive migrations. And I would say the number one vehicle that people have used is the team.
Well, Holly, you still there?
And some of that comes to the fact that the word SharePoint can still be kind of a 4-letter word. So team is
Hold
just
on,
kind
Holly.
of a friendlier way.
Holly, just in case it's not recording correctly, just kind of step back to where you were with the share drives because
Okay.
you completely froze. I think that the local recording probably got it, but just in case, since this is our first time using
we'll
it,
step
just
back. So again, I was talking about the mail migrations. We finished those. Okay. We did the OneDrive migrations. Scott and I have worked on many, 1,000, maybe more. I don't know, but we moved to all the home drives. We've done that migration. And the last kind of, I think, frontier in a lot of fully being onboarded into Microsoft 365 is those shared department project, drives where lots of people have access to. And we find that the number one vehicle, the friendliest way to get those migrations finished is to use a team. And a lot of that comes down to SharePoint. The word SharePoint is inescapable in Microsoft 365. It's going to rear its head in little places. Companies have found if you come out the gate saying, we're migrating you to SharePoint, people are like, please, no, not SharePoint. But if we're like, we're migrating you to a team, Scott knows and I know, there's SharePoint. But a team is a little bit friendlier space. It's got a lot of benefits. So this change, from my perspective as a trainer, huge in adoption. I can't wait till it's just full on in GA. We're not still seeing rollouts because I'm going to have to change the way I teach teams, but I'm grateful for the ability to change do that change up because this is going to be much better, much easier to teach.
And Holly, I know that this is not a SharePoint episode, but I just want to give Microsoft a huge shout out because the new flexible layout options in SharePoint where
True.
you can literally just drag anything around how you want.
It's so nice.
Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. Where is this
It really
been?
is good. I just know the word SharePoint is so load bearing in Microsoft 365. I don't think it can be changed. I don't think SharePoint could ever really be rebranded. But let me tell you, if you have hated SharePoint in the past, like forget what you know about SharePoint. Try it again. It is amazing. But I'm real, right? I know the word SharePoint is like a 4-letter word in some, environments that we work in. And that just we can blame it on on-premises SharePoint.
We can.
It's
So
so much
one last
friendlier.
thing that I don't know if you have anything extra on the chats and channels experience, but I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes just diving in to talk about the avatar improvements in the calendar. The calendar as well is another huge one.
Yes, 100%.
All right. So let's talk about avatars real quick because there's been a lot of stuff that's changed here as well since we last talked about it. So I've got the avatar app up. I opened that up by going to, let me find my mouse here, the apps button, searching avatars, and then you have to add it for the first time if you've never used it before. If you have used it before, it should be in there and you just open up the avatars app. So this will also be accessible to you in a Teams meeting, but I just kind of wanted to poke around in here and talk about some of the stuff that's changed. So you can see that the 3D models actually look a little bit better. We'll customize one of the versions of these and you can use 3 different avatars. So we're going to go into customize and just some of the stuff that really changes is it's not necessarily skin tone or color. That stuff for the most part has stayed the same, but they've added like quite a few different face options, eye options, brow options in here. They've given you more choice of hairstyles, so you can really kind of get crazy with what you want to do with your hair. So this is what I look like sometimes when I wake up in the morning. And you can change kind of, you can add additional makeup, lash lines, blur, lipstick. Like there's a lot that you can do in here, even in terms of just like changing your frame. So before you were kind of like, it's kind of like that 1990s, like Nintendo ice hockey moment is you either get the really skinny guy, you get the medium build guy, or you get the big fat guy that moves slow. You can really kind of like, you can change the frame. You can make it so you're a little bit heavier, a little bit thinner. Look at that thin fitting shirt. You can add muscles. So if you want to be a little bit bulkier, you can increase your waist size, decrease it. And for the ladies out there, you can change your bust size as well. So you can see that they really leaned into this quite a bit to give you more options for detail, not only in Teams, but also kind of in that Teams mesh experience if you're using like augmented reality or a VR headset. There's also a lot of different outfit options in here too. So we talked a lot about when we were doing kind of the demonstrations on this last year and even a little bit earlier into the year before about how it felt like there just wasn't a lot there and it was very thin and they kind of like, they didn't want to fully give up on that metaverse idea of, hey, let's see if we can get people, since everyone's working from home now, into a virtual space. Well, a lot of us came back to the office, even if it's in a hybrid capacity, but they did continue building and developing on this. And, I kind of applaud them for that because they could have just set it down and it could have kind of disappeared into the background like Microsoft Delve or Microsoft Sway, which is now starting to move things into read-only as well. But they continued working on this. I applaud them for it. And I think that from a Teams perspective, if you're in a Teams meeting, and I'll join one here real quick and let me do a reshare. So if you're in a Teams meeting and you're going into this, and you don't really want to show yourself, is you can come into avatars and effects and you can turn your avatar on, join the meeting. And one of the other areas that I really didn't expect to see as many improvements on as I have is if you kind of go in and you look at your different avatar settings, I'll turn my mic back on in there so you can kind of see it, is like, we're even seeing like the reactions kind of got tuned up. So all the reactions are in 3D now. So you kind of still have your standard, like, hey, here's a heart message, here's a point, here's a clap, but they've added more actions into here. They've added more kind of custom animations as time has gone on. And, again, like they've really just kind of continued to put work into something that probably didn't need a whole lot more love. And, I kind of applaud them for it. Like, success kid right there. Like, did we really need a reaction meme from the internet tied into Team's avatar? But this is, again, it's just one of those things where, like, if you're having like a fun Friday or something and everyone wants to join a Teams meeting using their avatars, like this can liven up the mood and make things a little bit easier. Or maybe you don't have a webcam and you want to feel like you're more present in that meeting. You can certainly do that with Teams. And again, even more options. Like, one of the things that I've really gotten into the habit of with Teams, and from an improvement standpoint, is I always like to have captions up in my meetings now. Not only does it let me know that my mic's not muted because I'll see myself talking, but it'll also, if someone's hard to understand on the other side of that meeting, it does a really, really excellent job of capturing that. And we're not going to demo it today, but there is a new meeting option for targeted release. Oh, and it's not showing. So under the audio settings, unless it is showing, and maybe it's just hidden. Oh, there it is. The Teams interpreter agent started rolling out to targeted members this week. And what this will actually do is, if you turn this on in a Teams meeting, you can go into your settings, and we'll probably do a whole show on this, Holly, is you can change your interpreted language to a number of different settings here. And you can have it simulate your own voice or use an automated voice. And I can hear it talking in the background, so I'm stopping because it's translating everything I'm saying into Japanese. But yeah, just more cool settings coming to Teams. And it's worth checking out. But there was one last thing that we wanted to show off for the show, and that was kind of just a peek at the new calendar that's been made available. So Holly, I'll let you reshare and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, while my screen is popping up, I just want to say the live translation, that's been something that so many companies we work with have wanted. They have global facilities. They want to be able to communicate with one another. We know that language is accessibility. And I frequently have had to do maybe not so great translations of some of my trainings that we've had to do, where they make a video that is for like a China team or something like that. And I don't speak Chinese, but this has made my work more accessible to people. And I really appreciate that because, even let's say I spoke Chinese. What about the time that they want me to speak Japanese? What about Czech? What about Danish? We've had those types of requests come our way, and I'm like not a polyglot, right? I can't know every language in the world. So this is really, really helpful. But on the side of the calendar, so this is also something that I would say if we have adoption issues, so you have an Outlook calendar and you have a Teams calendar. Which calendar wins? Outlook, right? Your Outlook calendar has more functionality. It just does a lot more. Where your Teams calendar is really focused on Teams meetings. They've allowed you to do a few different things now, but when you click this drop down here, you can schedule webinars, town halls, you can do all of these different types of events. Now, I still like to use the Teams meeting, and that might just come from I really adopted it. I'm used to going back and forth. But for those people that wish that their Outlook calendar lived in Teams, that's essentially what this is. This is basically a Outlook on the web calendar. So it does, again, if you've been shy for new Outlook, you don't really love it, this might not be for you. But here we get the ability. So let's say I want to schedule, I could still schedule some different things, but when I schedule an event here, the invite, it looks like an Outlook invite, new Outlook, right? Outlook for the web. But I don't have to know these two different UIs. I can just kind of settle on Outlook and I'm good. So new calendar is great because it also previously, I do think this is more of an option now in Teams, but previously, if you scheduled a meeting in Teams, it was a Teams meeting. Here, if you want to schedule things where you're out of the office, those sorts of things, you can do that here. You can see the scheduling assistant off to the side. It's I think a little bit more friendly. So new calendar is essentially the new Outlook calendar. But the good news is it's the same. It's the same as Outlook for the web. It's going to be a little bit more friendly for you. You can change the view. Let me see under here. You have a few more options. You can go to your calendar settings here. You can print a calendar. I don't know that too many people do that, but it's an option here. Where people were really hungry for functionality in the Teams calendar, I think Microsoft really grapples on like, well, do we keep building up the Teams calendar to be more like the Outlook calendar, or do we just find a way to show your Outlook calendar in Teams? So this is I see more of this type of coalescing between Outlook and Teams as time goes on, but I really do appreciate this. A few things that I will say that I do struggle with. Scott mentioned at the beginning of the show that your activity feed can be really helpful for this, but because the invites they're more Outlook based, we lose some of that tabbing in Teams, right? We want the attendance, we want the recap. I use that stuff all the time as a trainer. So I kind of stick in the old calendar, but if you don't use it very often, if you never really went to your Teams invite for things, the recap, the recording, and you just focused on the chat or the transcript is ready, those notifications will show up in your activity feed now, and you can just hop right in. So you get the benefits of using the Outlook calendar and the things you want out of the Teams calendar. They're not maybe merged into one, but it's still really easy to do.
And this is Microsoft's vision. Again, we've talked a lot about it with Teams and Outlook and everything that they've been doing over the last, I feel like 365 days to year and a half, is they want to develop less of the same apps across different platforms. And the best way to do that is to start containerizing and using this new WebView 2 approach, where you're building one app and you can put it in a container and it'll work just as you want it to work. Or you can just, you can natively just go to the web app for it, which is what we're seeing more and more. And it's also like one of the biggest complaints about the old version of Teams was, I open Teams, there goes 80% of my system resources for the next 5 minutes while it loads everything up. Yep. Is these web versions are less heavy because they're optimized for browsers rather than being a kind of everything has to live within the client side app. Now it's just the client side app as a container and everything is still really just living in a web version.
Right. And I did want to make just an invite to see, to show that you do get a little bit of the Teams experience where you can add a whiteboard. You can set up breakout rooms. So if these are things you traditionally do in Teams, you'll still get that sense. You can see some more stuff. Again, it's really just more, if you're the most comfortable working in Outlook, you can sort of bring that experience into Teams. Like I said, I think because I schedule so many I do webinars, a lot of that, it's just a little easier for me to stick to Teams. But I will say this, people have asked me for such a long time, they're like, what is this calendar? I'm like, well, it's a mirror image of your Outlook calendar. And they're like, okay, well, but it doesn't have the same functionality. I'm like, yep, it's more Teams meeting centric. People were really, didn't quite understand, like, well, when would I use this one versus the other one? Because I can set up a Teams meeting in Outlook. Like, can I just do that? I'm like, yes, you can.
The fact that you can switch back and forth, I think that really kind of encapsulates today's whole podcast. Is Microsoft is giving you more choices than they traditionally have. It's always been kind of, hey, get on the bus or get left behind. And at least for the time being, we're seeing more choice enter the equation. And I don't know if that's just their new design philosophy. I don't know if they're so focused on copilot that they don't have time to strip down the old house and move you into the new one. But I mean, I think that they're paying more attention to the telemetry on these apps, especially as they've moved to WebView 2, and they're understanding how people are using things, and they're making finer tuned adjustments over time rather than, hey, you've got 3 months to get off of this. I mean, we just saw, pour one out for Skype Business, or not Skype for Business, but just Skype in general, as they're shutting that down in, I think, May or end of April. Yeah. And man, it's just, they bought Skype, I want to say, during the Ballmer era, like
Oh my
2012-ish, I
gosh.
think, something like that. And you just didn't do a whole lot with it. But the foundational building blocks, very similar to Windows 8 to Windows
Yep.
10, is Skype became Teams in a lot of ways.
Right.
And just, the Skype experience, even from a personal standpoint, like there's now a version of Teams built directly into every consumer level PC that
Right.
gives you more options than just doing a Skype video call. You can also chat through it. You can call through it. It's just Microsoft seems that they are finally changing the way that they're doing a lot of kind of like their services.
Yep.
Um, make things a little bit more accessible for everyone. Forced
Yeah.
adoption with Copilot aside, they do seem like they're
Right.
moving things in the right direction. And I'm very excited to see what they can kind of continue doing in the future and what we're going to see out of their 50th anniversary event, which if you're watching at the beginning of April is happening next week, I think this week
Yes.
or next week, but it's coming up real
And,
soon.
I would say the one last thing, and we'll probably have to do a podcast around it, maybe even leading up to it. The biggest transition happening later this year, the end of Windows 10. So those are things that we definitely see. This is a really big transition year for Microsoft. Again, Windows 10 has a grip, and has had a grip on people for a very, very long time. So if you're listening to this podcast and you still got a lot of Windows 10 to go, just know support, will be ending. It's crazy.
You know
So,
what they say too, especially from an adoption standpoint, because a lot of folks organizationally and even in the consumer market haven't really adopted Windows 11 as much as I think Microsoft wants. And part of that is, yes, there's some hardware requirements that just aren't
yep,
met. But from an OS perspective, XP was great. Vista was kind of panned, though once Service Pack 1 for Vista came out, that was
yep,
a completely different operating system, which really just became
yep,
Windows 7 adopted heavily. Windows 8, not so much. Windows 10, people loved it. Windows 11, people still do seem a little on the fence, especially in
yep,
the consumer space. Is Windows 12 or Windows Copilot or whatever the
yep.
next OS is going to be, is that going to be the next big adoption version?
Yeah,
And I
I
mean,
mean,
I think that from what we hear behind the scenes is it sounds like there's going to be a lot of AI in that
oh,
to make
yes.
things easier.
Yeah,
Whereas Windows 11 has had a big security focus, I think Windows 12 is going to be an easier, more user-friendly type of
yeah.
OS to get used to.
Yeah, I think people have been burned by those OSs that have flopped in the past. I remember trying to hang on for Windows 8. I remember those days, but I guess I would say is I understand people's trepidation to make these changes, but I just really see that Microsoft is just sort of like, unless you are a super high powered, high paying, you know, contract with them, they're not going to limp these things along with us forever. They're just in a better servicing cycle, and they don't want to have to keep making things work on old stuff. So I do see these cycles of change, or kind of the servicing model that they've been striving for, um, is hampered by the constant need to, like, okay, we heard you, we're going to make this work on the old version of Outlook, we're going to make this work on the old version of Windows. I think those days are just getting shorter and shorter.
Well, again, thanks for the time. Let's take it to the outro. And yeah, it's been a great podcast. See you on the other side. Holly, thanks again for being here. And thank you all for your time and for tuning in this week. If you want to learn more about the recent changes to Microsoft Teams, you can visit the links in the show description. As always, we try to make that stuff available for you. There'll be quite a few notes down there. And again, as we kind of showed during the show, there's a new area in Teams where you can just learn about what's new on the fly. If you have any questions or need help with implementing or training around Microsoft 365 Modern Work, security, or new Copilot features, Virteva is a leading IT managed security and modern work partner, and we can help you with all of your IT needs. You can email us at letstalk@virteva.com or visit our website at www.virteva.com. Thank you again for tuning in this week. And if you made it this far, please don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. It really helps us out. Until next time, take care all. Bye.